Hello and welcome to Welty at Home. We are the slow reading virtual book club that alternates works by Eudora Welty with works by authors connected to Welty. And we are currently exploring Eudora Welty's 1941 short story collection titled A Curtain of Green and Other Stories. Today, we are going to read and discuss three stories. We've been reading and discussing three stories each session. And today we're going to be discussing Death of a Traveling Salesman, Powerhouse, and A Worn Path. I'm Jessica Russell, Director of the Eudora Welty House and Garden. We are grateful to Suzanne Mars, Eudora Welty's friend and biographer, and our friend, Professor Emerita at Millsaps College, for guiding these discussions. Just some housekeeping: to comment or ask a question, be sure to hit the reactions button at the bottom of your screen and select the raise hand function. That's how we're going to know that you have a comment or a question, and be sure to keep an eye on the chat as well. There's always a great discussion going on in the chat, and I've got a link that I'm going to share related to our Powerhouse story later on when that discussion gets going. So for now, I think we're ready to begin. Suzanne, where shall we start?
All right. Well, I thought I would start today by talking about some backgrounds to all three stories. And then I'm going to violate my own rules here, and I'm going to have us talk first about Powerhouse, because I want us to be sure and have enough time to talk about Powerhouse. And then we'll move on to one or two more stories, or none, and we'll catch up next time, however we manage that. So today we have three stories about travelers. One man who is traveling for profit, but realizing his need for love. One traveling for the love of his art, and one for the love of her grandson. So Death of a Traveling Salesman, Welty's first story, based on hearing a neighborhood friend say that he had heard the expression that someone had gone to borrow some fire. And Eudora has said this: my first good story began spontaneously in a remark repeated to me by a traveling man, our neighbor, to whom it had been spoken while he was on a trip in northern Mississippi. He's gone to borrow some fire. The words, which carried such lyrical and mythological and dramatic overtones, were real and actual. Their hearer repeated them to me. When Eudora sent this story in 1936 to John Rood at Manuscript, he responded that it was the best story he had ever received. And then he said, no, it's the best story I've ever read. But Eudora didn't think it was perfect, because she went on to revise it before she published it in A Curtain of Green, adding most of the lamp imagery that we find in that story, and deleting a reference in which Bowman recalls leaving money for a prostitute that he had visited. So that story then, Reynolds Price read it and years later told Eudora, I think that's the best story you ever wrote. And Eudora responded in horror, oh no, if it's the best story, it's my first story. How could that be? So she thought, Reynolds thought she hadn't improved at all. So anyway, that was the background of that story. Of course, we've got the allusions to Prometheus. We've got Bowman, sort of an archer figure. We've got the reference to Beulah land, all of those things we can discuss. Powerhouse was written in 1940, early in 1940, well, the first half of 1940. Eudora, of course, as a student, had lived in New York City. She had been to Small's Paradise. She had been to the Cotton Club. When she returned to Jackson, she went down on Ferry Street in the Black Business District and bought what were then called race records. So she was used to listening to jazz. She heard Fats Waller himself in Jackson in concert on May 8th, 1940, and went home and wrote the story Powerhouse. After that, she went off to Breadloaf, to the writers' colony at Breadloaf, and read the story there to unenthusiastic response. But Dermot Russell had faith in the story, her agent, and he began sending it out, and it was taken in 1940 by the late 1940 December by the Atlantic Monthly, published in the Atlantic in 1941. A lot of songs mentioned in the story. There are a lot of references to things in Jackson. The concert she heard in Jackson was a concert, not a dance. Michael Pickard and his students at Millsaps have provided a digital edition of the story with annotations. And so they tell you about an actual report of a mind-reading horse in Jackson, or at the cafe, the Hello World Cafe. So lots of interesting annotations, and also links to versions of the song. And so Jessica's going to put that in the chat for you.
I just added it for us.
Good. If you'd like to access that digital powerhouse. A Worn Path, the last story written for this collection, written after she had finished The Robber Bridegroom, when she began to write a number of Natchez Trace stories. After some conversations with Dermot Russell about Robert Coates' The Outlaw Years, and feeling that she would like to do that. She completed it in October of 40. It was, along with Powerhouse, accepted at the Atlantic in December of 1940. Inspired, she's told us, by the sight of an old woman she saw walking across the horizon when she and her friend Helen J. Lauderhouse, a painter, had gone out on the old Canton Road in Jackson, now part of the city, but then rural. And Eudora was sitting reading a book, and her friend was painting, and she saw this woman, and she thought she was walking with real purpose. And that was what gave her the idea for the story. And of course, the name Phoenix is something we'll want to talk about when we talk about that story. All right, so I'm going to stop talking now. Haven't talked too long, good. And we'll start our discussion of Powerhouse. Eudora has said that this was her attempt to translate one experience, that is going to the concert, hearing the music of Fats Waller, into a story, to translate that experience into a story. And I think we want to talk about a number of things here, but one, which we could ask almost about every Welty story, where is the voice coming from? That is, what about the narrator in parts 1 and 3? And then we need to talk about Powerhouse himself, and especially about his visit to the World Cafe. So I'm happy to start wherever anyone else wants to start. Anyone want to launch our discussion of Powerhouse? Beginning question. I'll tell you what, let me start us off by reading a little bit from the opening of Powerhouse. Oops, Laura, you go first.
Well, I just had a question because I've been a longtime Fats Waller fan, and I was curious why, and since the experience is so directly connected to him after hearing his music, why he wasn't named. What was the reasoning behind why his name wasn't? Why call him Powerhouse, I guess.
Well, I'll say one, I think, is she wants to show that he has power over the house. The power of his performance, the commanding nature of his performance. I think also that she would have felt uneasy fictionalizing the actual person, especially a living person. And so, and it was an imaginative response. It wasn't a response to the literal concert, but one which she needed the freedom for the story. I think Harriet might have something else to say about that. Yeah. Harriet?
I don't know that I have something else to say about that. I think I would say, the Powerhouse is a better name than Fats Waller.
Yeah.
But I did want to talk about point of view and say, it is a tricky point of view because we begin in the white dance audience, and we have that response to an exotic Black performer in the white audience, but we're going to tunnel towards Powerhouse. The point of view moves closer and closer to him. We know we're not with the white dance audience anymore when we go to World Cafe, when we leave the dance and go to Crosstown to the Black Cafe. So I'm thinking about who it is that we start with, and also the view, the relationship between the performer and that audience. I think there are a bunch of audiences in this story. I think I could count 5 that there is the gawking white audience. Then there are the band members that are divided into 2 parts. There's the far section of the band that's not really it, and then there are those band players who are close to him and travel with him and are collaborating in his improvisation. And then there's the audience at the World Cafe, and then there's us. And so we're full of audiences and a relationship to this artist. But the artist, Fats Waller, I think about Waller as one of the numerous, but maybe a special version of Black performer who picks up the mask that's being imposed on him, the stereotypes of a Black performer, and then he creates with them. He picks them up and wears it and plays with it. And I think what Fats Waller too, as an artist who was full of a kind of transgression. That one way of dealing with being a Black performer is his transgressive performance, and there are all of these references to transgression in the language of the story, where he's obscene and monstrous and derogatory and dirty, and when he performs a requested song, he does so with the greatest delight and brutality and displays such a leer for everybody. But that creative transgression that's so much part of Fats Waller's
let me suggest that people can see Fats Waller on YouTube videos, and it's really fun to watch and to see what something of what Eudora and her friend Sita Alexander saw when they attended the concert. They were at the concert. They were seated somewhere in the audience. And at the intermission, Eudora said to Sita, "Let's go down front." And they went down and they watched the rest of the concert at the edge of the stage. So she was one of the audience gathering around. Yep, I think let's go back to Harriet's first point. That is, we've got a lot of audiences. The first one we see is this white audience at the concert. And Eudora has said that the point of view in the first and the last sections of the story is floating around somewhere in the white audience. So it's her attempt to capture the attitude of the audience that she was part of. Not her attitude, but the attitude of that audience. Yeah, Miriam.
Hi, I've been away for a while and I'm glad to see you. I just have a small comment, and that is I am just struck and gobsmacked at Eudora Welty's writing about music. Some of you know I am a musician, I'm a professional musician, and she really gets it. She writes about the sound, she writes about the visceral experience of the performers, she writes about the interplay of the way of what's going on stage when people are performing, and just all their feelings and their thoughts. And it's amazing. I remember a story we read a while back in a different collection about a trumpet player, and she just writes beautifully about music and musicians.
Thank you, Miriam. That's another part of the story that we really would like to discuss. I mean, she captures the rhythm of the music. And when the Powerhouse is talking, when he puts 4/4 over the 3/4, then you get a 4/4 beat. If he's using the 3/4 time, you get him speaking in kind of triplets, and so you get that sense of rhythm. You get the sense of improvisation. So But I love hearing that from a musician because I'm not really one. Although I did grow up learning to play the French horn, but that's doesn't qualify me. Yeah. Okay. What else? Let's talk about this audience at the first. If we look at some of the lines from the first section of the story. There's no one in the world like him. You can't tell what he is. Negro man, he looks more Asiatic, monkey, Jewish, Babylonian, Peruvian, fanatic, devil. He has pale gray eyes, heavy lids, maybe horny like a lizard's, but big glowing eyes when they're open. He has African feet of the greatest size, stomping both together on each side of the pedals. He's not coal black, beverage colored, looks like a preacher when his mouth is shut, but then it opens, vast and obscene. Or skipping down. This is a white dance. Powerhouse is not a show-off like the Harlem Boys, not drunk, not crazy. He's in a trance. He's a person of joy, a fanatic. He listens as much as he performs, a look of hideous, powerful rapture on his face. Big arched eyebrows that never stop traveling, like a Jew's, wandering Jew eyebrows. How he plays, he beats down piano and seat and wears them away. Or he is so monstrous, he sends everybody into oblivion. When any group, any performers come to town, don't people come out and hover near, leaning inward about them to learn what it is? What is it? Listen. Remember how it was with the acrobats? Watch them carefully. Hear the least word, especially what they say to one another in another language. Don't let them escape you. It's the only time for hallucination, the last time. What about that description of Powerhouse? What stands out and what does it tell us about the audience listening to him at the dance, at the white dance? It's a white dance. I'll pick on Susan Shands there. What do you think, Susan? Ooh, we can't hear you. Whoops.
I got it.
There you are. Nope, we lost you again.
Okay.
I'll let you go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can now.
I think having been around musicians as a non-musician, just their relationship, especially the part, thinking of these people, how many of these people really know these songs and how foreign he is. But then the description of how he communicates and does the 5 courses and they each take their turn, it's really, that part is sort of a more organized than regular part of jazz, but this first part is just how foreign he is physically and how different it is. And the fact that she writes so well about it is really striking.
Susan's husband is a musician, so she's been around a jazz music.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so how foreign he is, how strange he is. He is Asiatic, monkey, Jewish, Babylonian, Peruvian, fanatic, devil. And so he's really other. He's something different. He's something attractive, but he's also something scary.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, Joubert.
I was going to say something similar. It struck me immediately how derogatory the overall collection of those terms are. You know, he's not transcendent, for instance. He's not exalting. He's somewhere in the dark to evil, devilish, monstrous, beastly sort of perspective to this white audience, looking at this person and they see him in really threatening terms in my reading.
Yeah, he is, but he does give them something they want, you know. Watch carefully. Don't let them escape. It's the only time for hallucination. Like they're wanting to break out of their constrained, restricted, repressed lives, and they see it in Powerhouse, but then they're afraid of it as well. Harriet.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, I mean, it is derogatory. It's also fascinated. It's also delighted. to see this performance. It's a performance of race, as well as a performance of music. And it's something, it's part of the act in this presentation. But there's also all the distance between this audience and the performer, as I mean, even in the music, you know, he's playing Marie, the Dawn is Breaking. He's playing big band songs, waltzes, as opposed that he listens to when he goes to World Cafe and listens to Empty Bed Blues.
Once he wants to listen to it, he can't listen to it because it's not on that.
It's not on.
Only the white music is on that Nickelodeon.
On that Nickelodeon, on that jukebox. You know, I'm just thinking about the relationship between Powerhouse's wanting to give this performance and his alienation. And he's contending with a lot. I mean, where this is a world where the music that he's plays for this white dance is not the music that he wants to play, where he is in a place where to have a refreshment, he needs to go across town. It's a place where performers couldn't spend but a night because they couldn't stay in hotels. And I'm thinking about the effect on that on him, and also on the performance that we hear. So that, you know, he says white dance, weeknight, raining, Alligator, Mississippi, long way from home. He's a man down in a whirlpool, and then he produces an improvisation which is both musical and narrative. But the narrative is being performed in the music. It's told with wandering fingers. It's told with 4/4 over the 3/4. But we hear the story of Gypsy and her death. But what the audience is hearing is the music.
I want to come back to that. I would go to Joellen first, because the story of Gypsy is interwoven with a song called Pagan Love Song.
Right.
And that's an interesting combination too. Joellen.
I just want to raise the fact that there are a lot of questions being asked: the who, what, when, why, where. And Harriet read to us the where, when Powerhouse says, you know, what you tell me the name of this place is. But in the last paragraph of this first section at the top of page 159, a really important fact about at least part of the audience is they're leaning inward to learn what it is. What is it? Listen. And that's setting us up also for the entire story.
Yeah, thank you. Let's look at that, what they listen to. So they're hearing, finally they hear Pagan Love Song, the one waltz he will ever consent to play, and he plays it by request. And the lyrics of Pagan Love Song are, where are the golden sunbeams and the lazy land dreams, all the happy years through, you'll belong to me and I to you. Come with me where moonbeams light Tahitian skies and the starlit waters linger in your eyes. Native hills are calling, to them we belong, and we'll cheer each other with the Pagan Love Song. So that's the song he's playing. And the narrator says, the audience thinks it's a sad song. That's not a sad song. All the happy years through, you'll belong to me and I to you. We'll be where Tahitian waters, where moonbeams light Tahitian skies and the starlit waters linger in your eyes. We'll cheer each other with the Pagan Love Song. You know, why does the audience think it's sad when the lyrics are pretty cheerful? Is it because of the interwoven story of Gypsy? Yeah, Joubert and Harriet.
I'd say it's the way the blues and jazz work.
Okay.
The tones are going to be similar, whether you're singing a happy song or a sad song, and they'll always have some degree of struggle in the genres.
Yeah, and when he goes to the World Cafe and tells about Gypsy jumping out of the window, splat, pluey, brains and insides every place, everybody's laughing up a storm. Typical of the blues, again, that kind of interplay with sadness and humor. But yeah, so it's his way of interpreting the song. Yeah, Bill.
Oh yeah, to that point, I'd say also a blues waltz is very sad invoking. You know, sadness invoking comes from a blues waltz. And actually, I looked up Marie, the Dawn is Breaking.
Yeah.
And that's in waltz time too. So, but the way I read the bottom of page 160, late at night they play the one waltz they will ever consent to play by request.
Oh.
And anything else is part of their set, if you will.
Yeah, thank you.
That's just how I read that. The narrator, I kind of thought there were a number of points of view, like at that late at night they play the one waltz. That starts kind of narration from the point of view of the band, the interplay of the band itself. You know, they're having this conversation that's going on. And so that's how I read that. I mean, there's several kind of this narrative break that goes on on 159. Power has as much as possible done by signals. So the band has a perspective in that as well. You know, like the only ones that count are the ones near Powerhouse. Is that from a band member's perspective, or is that from the audience perspective?
Now, I have taken that to be from the audience perspective, but I think you're right. It's going in and out here from band to audience in this part. And then when we go to the World Cafe, the white audience is left behind.
Oh, completely, yeah. And there's so much of the language that is coded, you know, that it really, and you can see why, you know, from a racial perspective, coded, and then from Eudora Welty's perspective, and you know, she's a woman writer, so you know she has to work around coded signals all the time. So I don't know. I just thought it was very complex narration all the way throughout. Like the narrator went into the band at the end of the story, and when they were in the cafe, and you know, became more of a God perspective, if you will.
Okay, let's look at the story of Gypsy that he tells first. He tells it twice, first at the White Dance and then again at the World Cafe. What about this story of Gypsy that Powerhouse is improvising, changing as he goes along? Yeah, Harriet?
I don't even know that I would say that he tells it the first time. I'm looking at, I mean, I think what's going on here is improvisation. I think it is something he's got going with Valentine and Little Brother. And I'm looking at, I got a telegram, my wife is dead, says Powerhouse with wandering fingers. Telegrams say, I'm skipping a little bit, here are the words, your wife is dead. He puts 4-4 over the 3-4. What name has it got signed if you got a telegram? Scoot is spitting away with those wire brushes. Little Brother, the clarinet player who cannot now speak, that he's not his moment to play, glares and tilts back. Uranus Knockwood is the name signed. Powerhouse lifts his eyes. Ever heard of him? That what I'm suggesting is that the first time it's performed, there's a lot of ambiguity about whether this is something that's communicated in music, or is it, or it's one with the music. It's Wandering Fingers. It's 3/4 over the 4/4. It's triplets. It's Scoot on the Wire Brushes. It's Scoot asking, it's Scoot who keeps saying, what name was it got signed if it got a telegram? When he's the drummer and the beat is being played against him. He's the opposition to the song. So I think on the one hand, this is a musical story. And on the other hand, I think it is an improvisation that has something to do with Powerhouse's blues in this performance, and his singing the song of that is not, we don't know if there's a gypsy. We don't know if there's a wife. But we do know that there's a song about losing her in a performance that is more transgressive than sorrowful, but pretty interesting.
He's thinking of Gypsy and he's singing this love song. And the love song is about, you'll belong to me and I'll belong to you. And he's away from his wife. So we've got that kind of counterpoint. And the song has a positive impact in lyrics, but he's singing it as a sad song as he's on the road. And so, yeah. So, your wife is dead. He gets a telegram, says, your wife is dead. Gypsy? So we know Gypsy is the wife. And Gypsy, the notion of Gypsy as a wandering person, the notion of Gypsy as a performer, a member of the chorus line. We know that they're separated a long way from home. So I think there is that going on there too. Shall we talk about the World Cafe? What goes on at the World Cafe? There was a cafe called Hello World. I didn't know this. Michael Pickard discovered it. I'm so happy he did. So now we know that there was that cafe. What about the time there? Let's talk about when they play the jukebox. And because I think it's kind of, that's kind of interesting. So Powerhouse says, here's $1 million nickels, play all the songs you want. And they go over and they say, they read all the names of the records out loud. Who's Tuxedo Junction? Asked Powerhouse. Tuxedo Junction was a song written by a Black musician named Erskine Hawkins, performed by him and his band, but made popular, really popular. It was pretty successful with Erskine Hawkins, but made a big popular by Glenn Miller. And so when he says, who's Tuxedo Junction? And they say, whose, it's the white band, Glenn Miller's band. And he says, he doesn't want that. He says, play Empty Bed Blues and let Bessie Smith sing. Silence, they hold it like a measure. That's not on there. Bring me all those nickels on back here, Powerhouse says. So here's the music industry dominated by whiteness. And even here in the World Cafe in Negro Town. What they do get they sent for you yesterday, here you come today, which was a Benny Goodman, probably the Benny Goodman version of a Count Basie song. So, but that's the one they play. Sent for you yesterday, here you come today. Which I think is a pretty evocative title about not getting what you want and being denied gratification. So then Powerhouse launches the real story of Gypsy here, or makes up the real story of Gypsy. What about that story? Anyone want to talk about it? Why the story of Gypsy? I'm looking right at Jo Ellen right now, so I'm going to see if she'll help me out.
Well, my mind was drifting somewhere else to the fact that he tries to tell this longer story and he's interrupted constantly in the World Cafe by the waitress who wants to tell him about the Mississippi River, the boy who drags the hero forward who had rescued people in the Mississippi River, whites who
Those
drowned.
grounded white people.
Yeah, yeah. But so that I was just thinking about that audience, but Gypsy herself, I mean, actually, this story seems to be more about him than about Gypsy.
Okay.
That he's, I mean, there's always somebody like Uranus Knockwood following around after me, everything I do, and messing around on the trail I leave. And he knows who found Gypsy, Uranus Knockwood. I'm not entirely sure what to do with all of that, but it's clear that we have an improv when Valentine agrees. You get the telegram. Sure, she misses you, little brother adds. No, it's nighttime. Sure, it's nighttime. He's making a decision about where this is going. But after that second major interruption, he gets to the important part where the waitress asks him whether it's the truth. And all that the truth? It must be the real truth, she thinks. No, babe, it ain't the truth, but I don't know yet. Oh, it's something even worse. It's something hasn't come to me, but I ain't saying it won't. He's working at it as through a blues song or whatever. But that strikes me as a really important section.
Yeah, I think so too. So he's improvising this story. He's making it up. And I think you're right. It's more about him than it is about Gypsy. And it's about the separation, the anxiety that he experiences on the road. And the truth, what is the truth? It's something worse. I haven't found it yet. What is it? She says, truth is something worse. I ain't said what yet. It's something hasn't come to me, but I ain't saying it won't. And when it does, then want me to tell you? Yeah. So there is that kind of realization that this is an improvisation. The other musicians are participating in it, and it's about a truth, but it's a truth, his truth, their alienation, their sense of separation from what matters. I think. Yeah, Harriet.
I want to say, I think that Uranus Knockwood is he invents that name back when the drummer is giving him a hard time and saying, "What name is the God signed? If you got a telegram, didn't you just call her up last night?" And he says, Uranus Knockwood, so there's this play going on in language, but there's also and the performance that's received by and protected by Little Brother and Valentine back when they're playing the music, and now in World Cafe, it's got there's a larger collaboration that goes on with the audience. Maybe there's a lot of distraction at first, but then this audience moans with pleasure when Powerhouse tells the story of Uranus Knockwood, and they recognize him. They say, "Middle-sized man wears a hat." Knockwood is now the man who brings the blues. And I think of my mother's old adage, which was "knock on wood to chase away the bad spirits." That sense of working with his audience to change the mood, blues that are. I think Ralph Ellison said it was fingering a wound, but in a way that is transformative as it turns to a kind of lyric communication with an audience and a joy that comes from that communication.
So Knockwood associated with luck, with bad luck, or trying to forward all. And then, of course, they pronounce his first name, Uranus, all the ways they can. So he is something, well, we won't call what that suggests that he is. I suppose I shouldn't. Okay. Joellen and then Bill.
I just want to suggest that on page 169, about 2/3 of the way down, it's in the last section, that Powerhouse gets somewhere. He's told by, I can't remember who says it, little brother, to kind of end the gypsy business. You sure enough unroll your voice some night. It about reach up yonder to her. So he's been looking for something that's lost. He looks at his piano. I think it's a great paragraph that he gives when Powerhouse first came back from the intermission. He took hold of the piano as if he saw it for the first time in his life and tested it for strength. Played an octave, looked inside, leaned against it with all his might, sat down and played for a few minutes with outrageous force and got it under his power. Then, a bass deep and coarse as a sea net, then produced something glimmering and fragile, and he smiles. And I don't want to go too far with Yeats's poem, The Song of the Wandering Aengus, but I don't know whether anyone has ever commented on this, but it really evoked this for me. Angus is wandering, he's caught a little trout, it disappears as a glimmering girl, and it's like an artist tracking something. But anyway, this is the real culmination of the story for me. And the Song of the Wandering Aengus also brings up to me the waltz's Pagan Love Song. The lyrics are very similar. And Marie, the Dawn is Breaking, maybe. But anyway, I think the Powerhouse has gotten somewhere. And now the narrator says, who could ever remember any of the things he said? They're inspired remarks that roll out of his mouth like smoke. And the matter of who, of course, becomes crucially important. Maybe it's you.
I love that glimmering girl. I hadn't even thought of that before. I like that. Good. Bill.
Yeah, that's probably way too simplistic, but that Uranus Knockwood comes up after, of course, we've already mentioned, after Scoot says something. And it's earlier, it says, Scoot is an unpopular boy, right? So he says, what name has got signed? If you got a telegram, and Powerhouse says, you're an ass, Knockwood.
Yeah.
Yeah, playing the drums, you know what I mean? And so I think it's just the band having some kind of interplay that goes on in bands, but anyway, that's probably too simplistic.
No, I agree. I mean, I think it's, he's an asshole. That's it. Okay, there you go. You're an ass. Yeah, I want to go back toward, well, let me go to Harriet first, and then I'll go back to the passage Joe Ellen was talking about, and I think we finish up there. Harriet, you go first.
Well, I may be going the same place you are. That is, I'm thinking about him coming back to the dance with his crew, and now they say he's going to say, take a telegram, and he's got it. And he comes back into the dance, having made the transformation in his mood. And he sits down and plays the piano in that wonderful passage that Joe Ellen just read. And he sings, somebody loves me. I wonder who, with a vast and personal, yet furious grimace on his face. Maybe it's you. And I just feel like I've been challenged by Powerhouse and by Eudora Welty to be the audience. That maybe somebody loves me. Maybe it's you.
Well, talk about transgressive. Here he's saying this to the white audience, right? But he says it with a vast, impersonal, and yet furious grimace. He's angry. He knows what the divide is here. And he's impersonal. You can't be too personal in this situation. But he's also furious, and he's grimacing. And so, and now the other thing is, this was not the original song that ended the story. Originally, it was a Fats Waller song called Hold Tight, I Want Some Seafood Mama. And the Atlantic Monthly thought Hold Tight, I Want Some Seafood Mama was too questionable in taste, shall we say, for its readers, and they wanted something else. I actually think Somebody Loves Me, the Gershwin tune, that they've requested. This is a song requested by the white audience. That is the perfect one, because it raises this whole relationship between the artist and audience and the African American and the white audience, both, I think. The alienation of the artist, you know, the voice of the audience says, when somebody, no matter who gives everything, it makes you feel ashamed for them. And Eudora Welty has said of herself that I have always wanted to give everything in her fiction. And if you have the Library of America on page 945, there is that passage. Miss Eckhart, what animates and possesses me is what drives Miss Eckhart, the love of her art and the love of giving it, the desire to give it until there is no more left. So I think Eudora Welty clearly is associating herself as the artist with Fats Waller, powerhouse, the musician, and the distance that the artist feels from the audience in terms of communication. But then that is intensified because of issues of race, I think, in Powerhouse. And there is Powerhouse saying to his audience, somebody loves me, maybe it's you, not likely. On the other hand, it seems to me that at the end of the story, the narrative voice has kind of shifted. The narrative voice seems a little more sympathetic than it was at the first. So I don't know what you think about that. Any other comments about the ending here? But I do love that vast, impersonal, let me get the right word, impersonal, vast, and furious grimace. I'm not getting it right. Vast, impersonal, and yet furious grimace. You know? Anything else here? So I do think it's a story about the artist, about the alienation of the artist, but also about race and about that, the alienation of race, and about masking. And here is Powerhouse. One of my students one time asked me, is Powerhouse the super duper magical Negro that Spike Lee talks about, this kind of false image? But I don't think so. I think the audience would impose that view on Fats Waller, the super duper magical. But Fats Waller, or on Powerhouse, but Powerhouse is not trying to save white people. He's not, he's furious. He's not going to play that role for them, I think. Anyone want to comment on that? We've got about 15 minutes left. We could start Death of a Traveling Salesman if you're ready to switch gears. All right, okay. Death of a Traveling Salesman. Where shall we go with that? Anyone want to start us off? What about going to borrow some fire? Do you want to start there? The origin of the story. What about that is key in this story, do you think? You know, Gilbert.
I'm not really answering your question. The story really resonated with me in a different way.
Okay.
I remember a friend of mine about 35, 40 years ago were driving around trying to follow the route of the old Natchez Trace up Tennessee. We were following up this dirt road that just got worse and worse and worse and worse. And finally we found ourselves in the back of a farmer's field. And but it was very reminiscent of this road that just sort of ran out of road at this the end of the world there. So it just reminded me, you know, evoked a memory of following the old Natchez Trace.
Yeah, and he has run out of the road. He's come to road's end, both literally and metaphorically here, hasn't he? So that he drives off the cliff. he's over the edge. This is Land's End. Yeah. Yeah, Marcia.
I'm only going to talk about the general fact that the salesman in American literature is an everyman. We see it in all kinds of stories, plays like The Death of a Salesman, the salesman characters in, is it Richard Ford? I mean, it's and another, my favorite traveling salesman is I can't remember his name, but he's Faulkner's Hamlet. I can't remember. Oh, Ratcliffe, he's my very favorite. But the salesman is a American trope that it's not Greek mythology, but it is American mythology, I think. And so we know we're talking about the American man here when we see a salesman. That's my comment.
All right, yeah. A man who is interested in selling goods and making a profit, who has the language, the banter of the salesman, which is a kind of artificial language that he uses as a defense mechanism when he doesn't know how to respond.
Oh, and Rabbit. I should have mentioned Rabbit. I mean, I'm thinking of all the different, especially in the 20th century, the salesman became an American archetype.
And if we could also mention the Hitchhikers,
right?
Welty story about salesman Tom Harris. So the rootless, the traveling nature. Yeah, Harriet and then Bill.
So I'm thinking about the opposition maybe of that rootlessness and the fire. I this time looking through, to the fire in the hearth, drinking the fire off the hearth, the fire on the hearth, the fire that is burning fruitful marriage, the warmth. I was just thinking across to Faulkner's Fire in the Hearth and wondering if he doesn't get that imagery from this story, which is she's publishing in 1936, he's publishing in 1942. I also thought a lot this time through about the post-COVID, about the medical aspects of the story, the influenza, the experience of having lived a month in which nothing had happened except in his head and body, life of the fever and privacy. There's an aspect of the story that maybe I hadn't paid as much attention to before we've had the COVID experience. But yeah, I'm thinking about the hopelessness, illness, and longing that is, and two, we're thinking about the difficulty of being an audience that receives a message. I'm thinking about Bowman, the readiness of his interpretation of this other class family, as he sees the woman as old, he sees her as stupid, and before his vision clarifies. So some connections maybe between Powerhouse and this story, as there are connections between this story and A Worn Path on the medical front.
Yeah, his distorted perceptions brought on partly by the influenza, but unable to see her as she is until the end, and then we're not sure he really sees her as she really is either. Yeah, Bill.
Yeah, there's so many things about this story, but we don't seem to read enough of her beautiful language. So I thought I'd just read one of my favorite paragraphs. That's on page 151. And it starts out, but he wanted to leap up to say to her, I have been sick, and I have found out then, only then, how lonely I am. Is it too late? My heart puts up a struggle inside me, and you may have heard it, protesting against emptiness. It should be full. He would rush on to tell her, thinking of his heart now as a deep lake. It should be holding love like other hearts. It should be flooded with love. There would be a warm spring day. Come and stand in my heart, whoever you are. And a whole river would cover your feet and rise higher and take your knees in whirlpools and draw you down to itself, your whole body, your heart too. She is just one of the loveliest writers I've encountered.
Yeah.
And that paragraph just sings.
His romanticism there, of what life could hold. And that it is beautifully phrased. But then when he realizes, this is on 155, he was shocked with knowing what was really in this house. A marriage, a fruitful marriage, that simple thing. Anyone could have had that. That's such a devastating thing. Anyone could have had. He hasn't. This is what he could have had. This is what has romanticized and mysticized him. Joelle.
I just wanted to comment on some of the imagery that Bill just read for us and how it flows through the story. We don't just have fire images here, but we have water and stream, which you read. And it starts in the middle of page 149 with the section that I think you read. That Harry did, that he had lived a month during which nothing had happened except in his head. And down a couple of points, he realizes it was a life of fever and privacy, a delicate life, which had left him weak to the point of what? Of begging. The pulse in his palm leapt like a trout in a brook. I'll just leave Angus with you there. But 2 more pages on 151 middle of 151, which we were just read, that it should be flooded with love. There would be a warm spring, a whole river would cover your feet. 153, you don't have to look these up, but the wife is flowing. She had flowed toward him. And later, these images come together. There are tears mentioned, in fact, but in 155, he's outside, or he's drinking with Sonny, and this is what I needed. This is good. This is what I needed. That's his salesman voice. But we get inside him then, it was just as though he were drinking the fire off the hearth. It's a gorgeous story.
It is. Well, you can see why Reynolds Price said, your best story you ever wrote. I don't agree with that, but you see why he would say that. It's such a beautiful story. Yeah, and the first thing that we find that stream is he hears the noise of the stream and he's afraid. So he fears that. And so what he needs, what he has not found in his life, suggested by all of this imagery.
Yeah, and she has to tell him he might be hearing the stream.
Right, yeah. Anything else about this story? What about the ending when he leaves? When he leaves the house. He must get back to where he had been before. He stood weakly before the red coals and put on his overcoat. It felt too heavy on his shoulders. As he started out, he looked and saw that the woman had never got through cleaning the lamp. On some impulse, he put all the money from his billfold under its fluted glass base, almost ostentatiously. Ashamed, struggling a little, and then shivering, he took his bags and went out. The cold of the air seemed to lift him bodily. The moon was in the sky. On the slope, he began to run. He could not help it. Just as he reached the road where his car seemed to sit in the moonlight like a boat, his heart began to give off tremendous explosions like a rifle. Bang, bang, bang. He sank in fright onto the road, his bags falling about him. He felt as if all this had happened before. He covered his heart with both hands to keep anyone from hearing the noise it made, but nobody heard it. Yeah, Bill?
Yeah, I hate to ruin that beautiful reading you just did. I was just thinking that he had said the prayer of every salesman before any of that, and that is there will be special reduced prices on all footwear during the month of January.
Yeah.
And that's how that was his nightly prayer. Yeah, the way this ended, I thought was perfect. I know it sounds strange to end in death, but how else do you resolve this whole story? It had to end that way, and it had to end lonely and next to his car.
Joe Ellen?
I just want to comment that after he slides back into his salesman lingo, he's still recognizing the noises at night, heard the stream running, the fire dying, and he was sure now that he heard his heart beating too, the sound it made. He recognizes the breathing round and deep of the man and his wife. The last sentence, but emotion swelled patiently within him, and he wished that the child were his. And that's as far as he can go. He must get back to where he had been before, and he walks away.
Right, and that's back to the prices will be reduced during the month of January. Where he's sheltered, where he's denying the emotions that would nourish him. Harriet.
I was just thinking about the car coming off the ravine in this desolate hill country. I feel like I'm in the Tishomingo Hills of Losing Battles in this story, and it's interesting that she starts there and she kind of ends there in her over the arc of her canon, but couldn't miss that. If that's where we are.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good place to stop. That this is the landscape that Eudora returns to in Losing Battles, and the same, and she's rethinking the nature of this world in the last thing she writes, the last piece of fiction she writes. The Optimist's Daughter published, revised and published after this, but really Losing Battles at the end. All right, well, let's stop there, and we will next time, we're going to talk about the whole collection and about the ordering of the stories and how, and that really did change my perception of a lot of the stories, reading them carefully in order, which I hadn't done for a long time, maybe since the first time I read them. And but we'll talk first about A Worn Path, and then we'll talk about the collection as a whole. All right, Jessica, thank you.
All right, thanks. See you next time.
Bye.